Hey everybody, this is JDGaming, back today with a deck profile of PKanko. Of course, that's not the name of an actual archetype, that's my own personal portmanteau of Phantom Knights, or PK, and Mikanko, the relatively new archetype from Amazing Defenders that just got new support in Sayak and will continue getting further support as well. Basically, this is a fun strategy where you play around with some equips and some ritual monsters, and you're able to do reflect damage to your opponent, much like how Relinquished did in the original anime. If you fight something bigger, your opponent takes the damage instead of you, and my brother kind of pointed out, because he's been like a PK resident expert basically forever, and he's pointed out, I'm playing spirits with these shrine maidens that traditionally are supposed to exorcise the spirits, but if you look past the weird mix-up in lore, it's actually a lot of synergy going on between these strategies, and I'm very happy with how this blind second OTK cheese strategy ended up turning out. And Mikanko themselves have so much untapped potential. If there's any new ideas that you've seen or things you want to share down in the comments below, definitely I invite you to go ahead and do that. But if you've never seen Mikanko before, don't worry, because this is going to be a let's build as always. I'll give you highlights on how the cards work and explain my reasoning as we build the deck from the ground up, so by the end of this, you'll be able to play either this deck or some other variant of Mikanko of your choosing. But without further ado, let's build PKanko. The first step in building a deck is to establish the theme and to build a core that supports the theme's goals, and because these cards are new, I wanted to spend just a moment quickly explaining the key components of the strategy, and then it'll be a lot easier to build the deck in terms of the quantities, ratios, that kind of thing. So it all starts off with this card, Double-Edged Sword, which is an equip spell that I guess came out as a common prior to Amazing Defenders, but I had no idea this existed. Basically, you can only control one, the equipped monster gains 2,000 attack, and both players will take any battle damage from battles involving that monster, and if you take 2,000 or more battle damage, which will probably happen with the previous effect, you send this to the graveyard. This ends up becoming a very fun one-shot strategy when you factor in Mikanko. So we're using 𝗗𝗄𝗃, the sword Mikanko, as kind of the stand-in to represent how the Mikankos play. Generally, they're level 3 main deck monsters except for the ritual. 𝗗𝗃 is a warrior fire monster, and her first effect is the same across all of the Mikankos. If it is not equipped with an equipped card, you take no damage from battles involving this card, but if she is equipped with an equipped spell, instead of you just not taking damage, your opponent will now take all the battle damage, and she does not get destroyed by battles as well. Then they have their own unique effects. We'll go over those in just a little bit, but generally what you're wanting to do is have 𝗗𝗃 or some other Mikanko monster equipped with a card if necessary, have Double-Edged Sword attached to your opponent's monster, and if you happen to have an opponent's monster with at least 2,000 attack, which every kaiju in the game will fulfill, you're able to bring them up to 4,000, make them take the 4,000 that they would take and you would take, because both players take this damage, and you basically double that 4,000 into 8,000 for an easy one-shot OTK. That's the core principle that we're going to be building with. In order to make things like Double-Edged Sword way more consistent, we can play copies of cards like Infernal Knight 𝗻𝗙, who basically says if you have a Fire Warrior monster, which, surprise, surprise, 𝗗𝗃 is a Fire Warrior monster, you're able to special summon him from your hand. If you do, it's treated as a tuner monster, and if this is special summoned by any means, you can target one of your Fire Warrior monsters or one of your equipped spells that is banished or in your graveyard, and you can add that equipped spell or that monster to your hand. You're often choosing something like a Double-Edged Sword, but there is a lot of different utility equipped spells that have a lot of consistency boosting abilities for this deck as well. So that's kind of a key component, especially when you combine that with Isolde, Two Tales of the Noble Knights, who on summon has an ability to search a warrior monster who you're basically unable to use other than for discards that turn, but she has another effect where for cost you send any number of equipped spells from your deck to the graveyard, which will then allow you to summon out a warrior monster of a matching level. For two warrior monsters, that is an amazing ability, because even if she gets effect failured or something, you still get to send at least the Double-Edged Sword to the graveyard, which will make it very easy to access with cards like 𝗻𝗙, or you can even go and use the fact that 𝗗𝗃 is a level 3 warrior monster and send multiple cards to the graveyard thanks to the new equipped spell Mikanko Dance 𝗵𝗈 from Sayak, which says the equipped monster does not get destroyed by card effects, a common effect across all the Mikanko equips. And also, if this card is in your graveyard, you can just revive a Mikanko monster from your graveyard and then then equip this to that monster, which will then trigger or make live any abilities that the Mikankos may have as well. So the fact that this card came out in Sayak is a huge boost to the strategy, because even beyond the debut strength of the Amazing Defenders set that I was playing off camera, now we can use Isolde to get even more value out of our graveyard and get a free monster into play as well. But one other thing we want to talk about, 𝗗𝗍𝗍, the Manifested Mikanko, and a card that will bring her out. So this is a level 6 ritual monster. You can ritual summon it with Mikanko Kagura, which you can play. It has some extra popping ability to remove things if you're going second, which this deck will want to do. In this deck, we're actually not going to play it, but I've seen plenty of decks that, of course, do. From your hand, you could basically reveal her, and then add any Mikanko card from your deck to your hand, and then afterwards you discard a card as part of this effect. So it could synergize with things like Dangers or Dark Worlds, but we're basically going to grab a copy of the Great Mikanko Ceremony, which is a quick play spell that just says cheat out a Mikanko monster even if it's a ritual from your hand. Remember, monsters like rituals or any of the extra deck cards cannot be revived from the graveyard if they have not been properly summoned first. However, you can ignore summoning conditions if they are still in your hand, and that's what the Great Mikanko Ceremony is going to do. And then you're able to go ahead and have Mikanko Ceremony banish itself in order to send a Mikanko card to your graveyard, which will let you set up something like a Mayo Ashidori or some other combo piece that you may need at the time. So there's a lot of flexibility there. This is basically my method of choice of bringing her out, because she will stay out on the field until the end of your opponent's turn, which is plenty. You're trying to win immediately anyway. The 𝗗𝗍𝗍 is a very powerful monster because she has the same effect as 𝗗𝗍𝗍 and the other Mikanko monsters, but you don't even have to have her equipped with anything at all. She will do that reflect damage no matter what, and she has a quick effect that lets you target any one equipped spell in your grave and equip it to any one monster on the field, which can be debilitating for your opponent or very beneficial for you. So this is a huge combo enabler that's very accessible in the strategy, and so this is going to be an alternative way that we can kind of meet the same criteria. This plus a kaiju on your opponent's field or a monster they already have that's vulnerable to attack with at least 2000 attack, equipped with your own double-edged sword, which you can even use 𝗗𝗍𝗍 to just equip directly, will allow you to win the game in one hit. So with those quick introductions out of the way, we can now talk about building the deck. Starting off, I'm just going to get this one out of the way. We're playing the one copy of Double-Edged Sword, which is all you need because of how accessible it is in the strategy. And then we're playing 3 copies of 𝗗𝗍𝗍, the Sword Mikanko. All the things I kind of talked about here are valuable. It is a level 3 Fire Warrior monster, so you can take use of any of those traits. And if she becomes equipped with an equip spell, which happens in quite a lot of methods, you're able to search a Mikanko equip spell from your deck to your hand, which gives you a lot of powerful combo options. So don't sleep on her other abilities as well. Then we play 1 each of 𝗍𝗍, the Mirror Mikanko, and 𝗗𝗍, the Jewel Mikanko. These are also level 3. They're all different types and attributes. You can see Water and Wind, Spellcaster and Psychic, still no attack or defense. Same first effect. When they become equipped, they have different things though. 𝗍𝗍 says, while equipped with an equip spell, quick effect, you could target an opponent's monster that they control and steal it as long as it's your opponent's turn until the end of that turn. So kind of a weird quick effect snatch steal effect, which is interesting. Then 𝗗𝗍 actually has a couple of effects. While she's equipped with an equipped card, your opponent cannot target any Mikanko cards, monsters, or spells, or traps, I guess, with any card effects. And if either player equips a card to 𝗗𝗍, you can add a Mikanko trap from your deck to your hand. There are a few options. I'm personally not playing them right now in this build, but there's an exceptionally powerful disruptive trap that's coming out in the future, as well as another ritual monster. At that time, it'd be something to revisit, but for right now in this build, these are just extra names that you can toolbox out pretty easily, and so it's worth playing 1 of each. You can always play different ratios in a pure or different build of Mikanko. Next up, we have 3 copies of Mikanko Water Arabesque, and let me tell you, this card is actually insane. The first effect is the same. The equipped monster cannot be destroyed by card effects, but during your main phase, you can use this Ignition effect to special summon any one Mikanko monster from your hand or deck whose name is different from the equipped monsters, even if it's your opponent's. Then the newly summoned Mikanko gets equipped with this, which will trigger the effects of 𝗗𝗍𝗍 or set up the abilities of 𝗍𝗍 or 𝗗𝗍. And on top of that, you have the ability to bounce the monster that was originally equipped with this back to the hand, so it clears out your opponent's annoying threats and can let you recycle your Kaijus to your hand so you could drop them again. So this card is very, very powerful because of both of those abilities. We have the 1 copy of Mikanko Dance Mayo Ashidori. This is that new one I mentioned. Has that protection effect, has the ability to just revive a monster from your graveyard that's Mikanko, equip it to that monster, so now it triggers your 𝗗𝗍𝗍 𝗵𝗇 as well. And there's a bonus effect where at the end of the damage step, if your Mikanko monster battled, and it doesn't even have to have been equipped with this or anything, you could target any one card on the field and return it to the hand. That is good to get rid of an annoying card. In this deck though, it's not always going to come up because of the fact that you're trying to one-shot your opponent or win in a battle phase, so it's not like you get a ton of value out of clearing things, but it's worth noting that it does have that bonus effect as well. Then we play one copy of Mikanko Fire Dance. This is basically premature burial or an extender of a Mikanko monster from your hand or graveyard. If you do, it gets equipped with this card, and then that triggers 𝗵𝗇 and all that stuff, of course. And then you can choose to special summon one monster from your opponent's graveyard to their field and negate its effects, which can help you put that 2000 attack monster on your opponent's field. Then we play one copy of Mikanko Reflection Rondo. This card is basically Snatch Steal. As long as you control a Mikanko monster, you will take control of the equipped monster. Its effects cannot be activated by either player as long as you control it. And if this thing leaves the field, you send the equipped monster to the graveyard, which basically means your opponent's not going to get it back super easily. Remember, the cool thing with Reflection Rondo is you can equip it to your opponent's monster as a quick effect using your 𝗗𝗍𝗍, because 𝗗𝗍𝗍 has the ability to target Rondo in your grave and then equip it to an appropriate monster on the field, so you could just put it on your opponent's monster and steal it during their turn. So lots of ways where if you have to go first and then set up disruption on your opponent's turn, you could still do that even though you are trying to blind second in this particular strategy. Now we're going to add the other two copies of 𝗗𝗍𝗍 as well. Of course, I've talked about all the key pieces of this in the earlier part, so go check that if you haven't already and don't know exactly what this card does. But it's cool that this is a level 6 ritual monster, because now we can play 3 copies of Preparation of Rites in order to search it, because it's less than level 7. We play 2 copies of the Great Mikanko Ceremony, just to make sure we have 1 to summon, and then you have the banish effect to set up some other combo piece as well. And then you have another one for a follow-up play in case. I never felt you needed 3, and I felt 2 is nice just so you don't end up playing it once, and then you don't win for some reason. 𝗗𝗍𝗍 gets bounced back to your hand at the end of your opponent's turn, and then now you can't bring 𝗗𝗍𝗍 out anymore. Wouldn't be the end of the world if you did run out, but 2 copies helps prevent that issue. And then we play 3 copies of 𝗿𝗏𝗏. I know a lot of people like playing this card as just a one of Garnet for the strategy, but I found because he's an extender from your hand and he turns himself into a tuner, he's actually quite useful. And ever since Mayo Ashidori, that new equip spell, came out for the wind monster, it's going to end up going to the graveyard along with Double-Edged Sword and another card for a summon of 𝗵𝗇 from the deck with Isolde. And so I don't usually summon 𝗿𝗏𝗏 from the deck directly. I like just drawing or searching him and then summoning him from the hand. Then he's useful as a tuner as well, so we can actually go and combine him with any of our level 3s to summon Herald of the Arclight. Of course, this is kind of a solemn judgment on legs, as well as a macrocosmos for any card being sent from the deck or hand to the graveyard. But on top of that, if this hits the graveyard for any reason, you can add a ritual spell or monster from your deck to your hand, and that lets you fetch 𝗗𝗍𝗍 if you didn't get it into your hand already by that point. So on top of being a very good end piece to your board, it's also a very good combo piece to help you access parts of your engine. We play 1 copy of Fire Flint Lady. This is basically a 4th copy of 𝗿𝗏𝗏 with a different name. She has some other abilities as well. If you control any warrior monster, it doesn't even have to be fire, you could special summon this card from your hand. And then once she's on the field, you can send her from the field to the graveyard to special summon a different level 4 or lower warrior monster from your hand. And if you do, that monster can't be targeted by card effects. So you could use this in order to protect yourself on your Phantom Knight plays or your 𝗵𝗇 if you think your opponent may be trying to negate you. And then the last card for this kind of part of the deck, just because we are playing the Preparation of Rites, is a copy of 𝗉𝗍𝗔. You're never going to ritual summon this card, but basically what 𝗉𝗍𝗔 does is it's a hand trap where you discard it if your opponent tries to target one of your monsters, and you negate that effect that targets, so you can protect yourself from effect failure, imperm, things along those lines. There are other options as well with Preparation of Rites, like you could easily search Illusion of Chaos, which would let you play Magician's Souls. That's easily a fun way to explore the strategy with more equips, maybe with Diviner of the Herald and Power Tool Braver Dragon. I played around with it. I did settle on this current build where I didn't use that engine, but there is so much untapped potential with that as well, so feel free to look around in that direction if you would like. Next up, it's time to get to the other half of our deck. We're using a copy of Rhoda because it's able to search not only the 𝗵𝗇, 𝗿𝗏𝗏, and Fire Flint Lady, but also going to lead us into our Phantom Knight, which is a bit more of a package in this deck. We're not playing a full Phantom Knight deck or anything. Starting off with 3 copies of Tauren Scales. This card lets you discard a card to send any Phantom Knights card from your deck to the graveyard, which basically they all have graveyard abilities that will let you combo off in various ways. And if a Phantom Knights monster in your graveyard is banished while this card is already there, there. You can special summon this back, but banish it when it leaves the field. As a warrior monster, this is going to help you summon your Isolde much more easily, and it's also a pretty good discard along with all these other guys for your 𝗗𝗍𝗍 because they have effects in the graveyard. Similarly, we play one copy of Silent Boots and one copy of Ancient Cloak. Basically, Silent Boots lets you special summon itself if you have a Phantom Knight monster already in play. Ancient Cloak has this dark attack boost ability, which very rarely comes up, but sometimes it could. And then these guys have abilities where you can banish them from the graveyard, effectively doing the same thing in this deck. Silent Boots adds a spell or trap of a Phantom Knights theme from your deck to your hand, and Ancient Cloak adds a The Phantom Knights card, which could either be a monster most of the time, or a copy of the Phantom Knights of 𝕗𝗔𝗊𝗓, which is basically your only trap in the deck, so you could set it, immediately play it, get a free level 4 warrior monster on the field. Although that level is not quite as useful as some of the others, the fact that it's a free warrior extension makes this whole package very efficient at getting you to your second warrior for Isolde. And again, you can discard these guys or the Torn Scales in order to access monsters for free once they go to the grave with 𝗗𝗍𝗍𝗍. And then the last card I'm playing to kind of work with them is a single copy of Foolish Burial. You're going to get a free body off of this and recoup any losses, so I do think it's nice having this ability to send a piece that you need from the earlier part of the deck or just one of the Phantom Knights, and you'll be able to go off on your combos that way. In order to take advantage of the Phantom Knights, we're playing this little package here where we go rank 3 monster with any 2 level 3s in order to pop itself and an opponent's card. Then when Breaksword dies, you're able to revive the 2 Phantom Knights monsters that were level 3 in your grave. They come back as level 4s, so you overlay into Raider's Knight, and then you can detach a material from Raider's Knight to 𝗗𝗍 summon Arc Rebellion 𝗗𝗍's Dragon on top of it. Keep an 𝗗𝗍 monster as material because Arc Rebellion says this 𝗗𝗍 summon card cannot be destroyed by card effects, which will stop you from dying to the blowback of Raider's Knight trying to destroy this later. And on top of that, you can detach a material from Arc Rebellion to absorb the original attack on every monster on the field, both players' sides. Then, if it has a dark monster as 𝗗𝗍's material on resolution, you also negate the effects of all face-up monsters on the field. So it's a Dark Ruler no more who absorbs the attack of everything, and then after that resolves, you can't attack with anyone except him, but he starts at 3000, easily absorbs the attack of all your Kaijus, all your opponent's remaining monsters, anything else you can field before using this effect. And so this is an alternative way to do an OTK, which is another reason why I wanted to play the Phantom Knights. Then for the rest of the main deck, we're just playing Kaijus. We play one 𝗗𝗄𝗄𝗓 because it's the weakest, one 𝗗𝗏𝗠𝗓𝗄𝗓 because it's the next weakest, one Radian because it's a dark monster, and that actually does come up sometimes in working with the Phantom Knights or something like that. And then I play one copy of 𝗗𝗍𝗄𝗓 as well, just because it is one of the strongest tied at 3300. We play 4 different names because you usually want to play like either 4 or 6 different names depending on the size of the package for our 3 copies of Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. If you're playing 6, you'd go 2/2/2, but I felt 7 total cards between the 4 Kaijus and the 3 effectively dark holes was enough. This card is just really strong in a format where people are not always able to negate it. You're able to go and bring out something big like a 𝗗𝗍𝗄𝗓 to your field while your opponent gets something small like a 𝗗𝗄𝗄𝗓. And again, even the 𝗗𝗄𝗄𝗓 has more than 2000 attack, which means it is enough to one-shot with the Double-Edged Sword and the Mikanko cards. Now the main deck is done, so it's time to finish up the extra deck. We're going to play 2 copies of Isolde. I explained what this card does, but basically now the reason we play 2 is if you activate the effect to search a worthless card that you would just discard off of the summon of Isolde, because again, you can't use it that turn, you can actually then, if you get effect failured, okay, that's fine, turn the Isolde plus another warrior extender into a second copy of Isolde, and then you use the second effect that you wanted to use anyway. If that also gets negated, then you're kind of fine anyway in most instances because you're going to just send your cards to the graveyard. And so if you send like the Double-Edged Sword, which you need, as well as the Mayo-Ashidori, that's going to bring back a Mikanko equipped and ready to do the damage to the opponent anyway. And so then you just need an 𝗗𝗍𝗍𝗓 to bring back the Double-Edged Sword to your opponent's monster, and then you win from there. So that's why we play 2 copies of 2 Tails. To make Isolde even more consistent, we play 1 copy of Ferocious Flame Swordsman. You don't really care too much about this other than it's a 500 attack global power boost to warrior monsters, which is very nice for trying to deal damage. And on top of that, you summon this warrior monster with any 2 monsters of different names. So that can even be you drop a Kaiju on your field after you have one on your opponents. You bring out Nini or Huli, the non-warrior Mikankos, whatever the case may be, this will let you get into Isolde more consistently. Then we play 1 copy of Akashic Magician because you have a bunch of monsters with the same type, and you're able to go and summon this into column 2 or 4 where you've planted your Kaiju on your opponent's board, bounce it back to your hand, and then drop the Kaiju again. So this card's very strong for that. Last card that's important specifically for this deck is Cross Sheep. This thing has an effect where if you special summon a monster to a zone it points to, while it's also pointing to a ritual monster, you can draw draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. It's so easy to cheat out 𝗗𝗄𝗎 into a zone this card points to, and since this only needs any 2 monsters with different names, it's so easy to bring this out. And then the last cards that we're playing are just general cards. We play 𝗗𝗏𝗑 because you're playing so many dark monsters anyway, you might as well. We play 1 𝗚𝗚𝗄𝗃 because this card makes things invincible and gives you some plays on your opponent's turn if you need it. We play Nightmare Unicorn to go alongside that. You can so easily discard your Phantom Knight monsters and such to get things off your opponent's field. You could play 𝕮𝗔𝖓𝗍 as well, but I just didn't want a full Phantom Knight package. If you did, I would consider something like a Fog Blade, maybe a Wing in order to get some flexibility in effect negation and protecting your monsters, but that's our link 3. And then for link 4 is we play Access Code Talker because this thing is so easy to go into and just annihilates everything. 𝗵𝗄𝗄𝗧 because this is actually one of the cards you go for in the event that you are forced to go first. And Mekk-Knight Crusadia Avramax, who can either be gone into first, or if you have that IP Masquerena, remember that IP protects your monsters from being destroyed by card effects. Avramax pretty much is only outable by things that don't target or do things of a very roundabout nature, and IP protects you from a lot of those effects as well. So that's going to round out our extra deck. And with that, we've successfully built PKanko. Special thanks to anybody who watched the video in its entirety. Now we're going to go ahead and do the deck profile in a very anticlimactic alphabetical order, starting with Fire Flint Lady, then Gamma Seal. We play 3 copies of 𝗗𝗏, the Sword Mikanko, 1 copy of 𝗗𝗏, the Jewel Mikanko, a full playset of Infernoble Knight 𝗏𝗏𝗏, 1 copy each of 𝕮𝗔𝖓𝗑𝗏, the Star Destroying Kaiju, and 𝗗𝗏𝗋𝗆, the Sticky String Kaiju, 1 Nini, the Mirror Mikanko, interrupting Radian, the Interdimensional Kaiju. Then for our Phantom Knights, we play 1 Ancient Cloak, 1 Silent Boots, and 3 copies of Torn Scales. And then for our Ritual monsters, we play 3 copies of 𝗗𝗎𝗎, the Manifested Mikanko, as well as 1 copy of 𝗗𝗏𝗏𝗏, the Ancient and Ascendant. For spells, we play the 1 Double-Edged Sword, 1 Foolish Burial, a full 3 copies of Interrupted Kaiju Slumber, 1 Mikanko Dance 𝗏𝗏𝗄𝗏 Ashidori, which I'm not sure why they didn't translate, 1 Mikanko Fire Dance, 1 Reflection Rondo, 3 copies of Mikanko Water Arabesque, 3 copies of Preparation of Rites, 1 Reinforcement of the Army, 2 copies of the Great Mikanko Ceremony, and then for our trap, it's just a single copy of the Phantom Knights of 𝗮𝗏𝗍𝗓. For the extra deck, we play 1 Synchro monster in Herald of the Arclight. We play a 3-card Xyz package of the Phantom Knights of Breaksword, Raider's Knight, and Arc Rebellion Xyz Dragon. Then for link monsters, we play 1 Akashic Magician, 1 Cross Sheep, 1 Dark the Dark Charmer, 1 Ferocious Flame Swordsman, an IP Masquerena, 2 copies of Isolde, 2 Tales of the Noble Knights, and then that's it for our link 2s. Then we have 1 Nightmare Unicorn as our sole link 3. Again, you can play a full package of Phantom Knights with Rusty Vardish. I just chose not to for this build. And then for link 4s, we play Access Code Talker, 𝗵𝗄𝗄𝗏 Bow of the Goddess, and Mekk-Knight Crusadia Avramax. I generally don't build with Phantom Knights all that much because it's been something my brother's been playing with his tour guide from the Underworld for don't even know how long now. Shout out to him, actually. He started a Master Duel channel recently called Tour Guide from the Underworld, where he literally just starts with Tour Guide, does insane shenanigans, sometimes using Phantom Knights, sometimes not, but he's able to just do the craziest combos. It'll probably be possible with Tour Guide. That said, this was a refreshing opportunity for me to dabble in them a little bit after seeing them across the table from me for so long, and I do think it is a fun way to play around with Mikanko as well. I'm looking forward to seeing how the Mikanko package ends up working as a deck and maybe as a support engine in other strategies going forward. Thanks very much for watching, guys. This is JD Gaming. Hope you guys enjoyed as always, and I'll see you guys next time.